Hello everybody and welcome back to Screen Stars. Goon, Last of the Enforcers is the sequel to 2011's Goon and is directed by Jay Baruchel and stars Sean William Scott, Alison Pill, Wyatt Russell, TJ Miller, Liev Schreiber, Alicia Cuthbert and Jay Baruchel. And if anyone saw the first film, Goon, what you will have seen there is really quite an enjoyable ice hockey sport comedy movie, and it was quite a surprise. I really quite enjoyed Goon. I thought it was a bit of a surprise hit for me, and obviously it did well enough to warrant a sequel. So this is what we've got. So I've been reasonably looking forward to watching this movie, and it tells a story this time round. It's a few years after the first movie. Basically, him and his team are veterans now, but he ends up having to retire because he injures his shoulder in one of his trademark fights on the ice hockey ring with Wyatt Russell's character, who beats him in a fight. So he has to retire from ice hockey. He can't do it anymore. So he leaves. Wyatt Russell's character, there, or you can see there on screen, comes into the team and takes over as captain, while Sean William Scott's character, Doug, has to get a run-of-the-mill job like working in insurance, working in this terrible basement. His wife's pregnant, Alison Pill, who you may remember from the first one, but he desperately wants to get back into hockey, and slowly but surely he works his way back. He gets Liev Schreiber's character, who he fought in the first one, to train him to train with his left arm rather than his right to punch. And slowly but surely he tries desperately to work his way back into ice hockey, unbeknownst to his wife, who is now terrified that he's going to get hurt because she's got a baby on the way, etc., etc., etc. So that's kind of the gist of the story. I don't want to go in much deeper into it really, but one thing that struck me about watching this movie, and struck me quite heavily, is this is almost in a lot of ways a beat for beat remake of Rocky 2 if you actually analyse it. You've got an ice hockey player that has to retire through injury, which is the same thing that happens in Rocky 2. He has to retire at the end of it because of his eye injury. This one's a shoulder injury in this movie. He has to get like a normal everyday job to make ends meet to support him and his family, which is what happens in Rocky 2 and this. His wife's pregnant, as in Rocky 2, as in this. He desperately wants to get back into the sport he loves, Rocky 2, Goon, Last of the Enforcers, and he starts doing, training behind his wife's back, and ultimately he's seeking the approval of his wife. All of these things are pretty much beat for beat stuff that you see in Rocky 2 in this. That doesn't make this a bad film, it just doesn't make it the most original idea that you've ever seen. But I do think that this is a worthy sequel to the first one. I'm not sure it's just up to the standard of the first one, but it was funny. I did laugh out loud several times watching this movie. The humour did hit quite a lot. It's well acted, some good characters. He's got such an innocence about him, Doug, Sean William Scott's character in these movies. You just can't help but root for him, really. And he's backed up, like I say, with great characters like Alison Pill and Liev Schreiber, and Wyatt Russell, who plays a great villain in this piece. He's very, very good. And boy, is he a spitting image of his dad. There are some misses, some of the humour misses the mark. TJ Miller's in the movie. He plays like a sports desk announcer who is trying desperately to be like, Anchorman. I found most of his humour didn't really work for me in this movie. But the biggest miss, surprisingly, in this movie for me is actually Jay Baruchel, who directed the movie, but is also in it, playing the same character he did in the first one. But he was bloody annoying in this movie. I don't remember him being this annoying in the first one, but it was completely unnecessary, I think, his character in this movie, and I don't really feel he added anything to it other than some pointless toilet humour. But he's not in it that much to spoil it. But I think what this film does have going for it, at the very heart, centre of it, is it's got a good heart again, very much like the first one. And it does make you root an awful lot for the Doug character and indeed the team. So I think this film does work on a lot of different levels. Absolutely, it does. It just niggled me a little bit, the fact that it was almost a beat for beat remake of Rocky 2 in a lot of ways. Um, Now I understand, and I think Jay Baruchel wrote it as well. I'm surprised Stallone isn't suing him, to be honest. It's so similar in a lot of ways, but it is worth your time, especially if you're a fan of the first one. I did enjoy it. It was funny when it needed to be funny. It has a good heart. The fight scenes when you get them are great. And I'm not a hockey fan at all, but I like well-made sports movies. And this is a good one. This is definitely worth your time, certainly if you like the first one.